Good day to you all and welcome back to the Colour Cave where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Jem and today I'm happy to announce the first in a series of 3 videos featuring our Cave Stash voting, which was on acrylic paint. So as I did last time, I'd like to take this first video just really to have a play about and explore. I have only used acrylic paint in a very basic form to cover a background in a colouring page, and it's usually been black, so that's not very exciting. So we're just going to have a little delve into what I have for you, and this is all you, so I want to thank you all very much for your input and also for taking the time to vote on what you would most like to see. I did read through the comments after the last video that we did when I asked about this, and quite a few of you had mentioned the fact that you would like to have a Gem's choice, so something that maybe I would like to try out. So I think the next time after we've had our next Cave Stash, I will include my own suggestion in amongst the most popular one from you guys, and if you like that, well, you can always vote for that one too. So let's get to top down view and have a little adventure with some acrylic paint. How exciting. Let's get going. Okay, so first of all, this is something that I already owned, and this is 2 tubes of Windsor & Newton Galleria acrylic. I don't know if it's pronounced Galleria or Galleria. To me, if it was Galleria, it might have 2 L's or 2 R's, who knows. Anyway, I already had these and I bought this for a project. Some of you might remember a while ago was a scroller box challenge, and I painted a little set of drawers that I had, and I used acrylic paint for that. So I bought the white one for that specific purpose. I'll link that video down in the description if you want to see what I did with a little set of wooden drawers. I bought the black stuff a long time ago, and that was for backgrounds for colouring pages, which is something I highly recommend, and I have used it in that other aforementioned project also. So I've got 2 massive tubes of that, and that is Mars Black and Titanium White. So being a fan generally of the Windsor & Newton products, that's kind of what I gravitated towards, but also during this lockdown period, the available supplies, you know, the variety and the choice that's available has been quite limited. So I decided to go for this, and it is a Windsor & Newton acrylic colour collection, and there was a particular reason that I bought this, which I'll go on to in just a moment, but basically it's a kit with everything you need to get you started with acrylic paint, which is great for me because I have no idea what I'm doing. The other thing that I have here, this was just something that I picked up in passing, and it is a set of acrylic colour tubes, and it's from WH Smith, and I don't know if you can see the price on that there. It's half price at £3.99, so that's £3.99 UK pounds. That is super cheap, and although these are the student grade Windsor & Newton acrylic paints, they do a professional level set as well, which are much more expensive again. But I was really curious to see the difference between a budget tube of acrylic paint and also the Windsor & Newton one. So I'm going to do that as a separate video. That's going to be one of our 3 videos. So I'm going to pop these off to the side just now. We're not going to use them today, but I just wanted to show you what I've picked up. So the reason that I bought this particular set, and I paid just over £30 for this, I think it was £32.29 or something with the postage, and at the time that was the cheapest I could get it. I have been informed that this has dropped in price, and normally it is a lot cheaper even on Amazon, but it's obviously just the current environment, so I wanted to get as much bang for the buck as possible. So if we just take the lid off here, we have a set of paints here, and these tubes are a lot smaller. These are only 20 millilitres, whereas these ones are 120. That looks so dinky. You do get smaller ones again, but I plumped for the set because I just thought it was a better idea. You know, to give us a range of products. So we've got some interesting colours here, which we'll look at in just a moment. I've also got 2 acrylic brushes. I have cheap paint brushes that are supposed to be kind of multi-purpose, but I wanted to actually experience what the professionals would call an acrylic brush, so that is what I've got here. There is a number 6 and a number 4 round. Obviously when we start messing about we can use other paint brushes too, but I thought this was quite important for the purposes of this first video. Now, here's the interesting part. If I lift this up and out the way, underneath we have a sort of leaflety thing, but we also have this, and this is what I was curious about. This is an acrylic pad, and it is the Windsor & Newton one. There's 15 sheets and it's 300 GSM, and it is literally like canvas in a pad form. It's really thick and it's got a coating on it, but it also has a texture as well. And I'm hoping if I zoom in and hold it to the light that you may be able to see. I'm not sure if you can, but when I run a paintbrush over it, you will see it. It looks like canvas. And that's what I was most curious about, because I've heard different things and I know that there are different types of acrylic paint available. You do get ones that are very thick, and you get ones that are kind of more meant to be mixed with water, more like a sort of gouache type idea. In terms of how it behaves on paper, it was something I was like, well, what kind of paper are you supposed to use? Do you use mixed media paper? So this is good, because at least I have something that you're supposed to use acrylic on. And I love the cover in this. Look at all that thick gooey paint. That looks great. So in this leaflet, this is probably my favourite thing. On one side is a gigantic colour wheel for your perusal, but underneath it also tells you a little bit about different palettes and colour schemes and mixing colours as well. So again, just a lovely place to start if you're new to that sort of thing, or you're new to painting in general. For example, here it says secondary colours, which it gives you is orange, purple and green, and they are made by mixing two primary colours. So it's just a little basic information for you to kind of like help you along the way. The other side is an advertisement for Windsor & Newton. That's pretty much all I can say. So it tells you about the colours that you've got and why you would choose acrylic paint in the first place. And it also lists different techniques that you can do, and with every single technique they suggest a Windsor & Newton product to help you along the way. So things like heavy structure gel, if you want a lot of sort of texture and brushy, strokey type things, and they've got things like matte and gloss mediums as well. So for me, this is not something that I would do right from the get-go. It's maybe something we could try later on once I've got a grip of what's actually going on with the acrylic paint to start with. It tells you about the pad. Windsor & Newton acrylic paper pad has been specifically designed for use with all acrylic colours and mediums. Its canvas-like texture, that's what I was talking about earlier, is made from 100% acid-free paper for stability and resistance to aging, so that's quite good to know. It also tells us a little bit about our brushes and suggests the professional acrylic brushes as well. So they do a separate range of professional acrylics in the brush department as well. So if you get kind of excited and decide you like it, you can get some really good brushes too. I imagine they would be more expensive again, as is generally the theme with these things. We've got 10 sets of paint here, 10 tubes of paint. We have 2 yellows, so I think we're going with the whole cool and warm colour idea, and that happens quite often in sets. So we've got lemon and yellow. We've got lemon yellow and cadmium yellow hue. We've got cadmium red hue and permanent rose, cerulean blue or cerulean, depending on how you want to pronounce it, ultramarine. We've got raw umber and yellow ochre, and in addition to that, we've also got phthalo green, which is one of my personal favourites, and we have titanium white, which is the one I have in the Mahusive tube. So yeah, we can get rid of that. So we've got quite a lot to work with here. So I just want to start by having a play about and just see what it's like going down on the paper, and yeah, let's just play about. Okay, so I've grabbed a few other bits and pieces here. I've got a plate which I'm going to use as a palette. When I'm using gouache, I like to use a plate rather than a palette with, you know, specific dinkles, I call them, specific hollows in them, just for ease of mixing. And I think I'm going to be the same kind of way with acrylic paint. So that's a really old cheap IKEA plate, an IKEA 365 plate. I think I paid about 50 pence for that like 10 years ago or something. So nothing precious. I've got a little rag here just to wipe my brush on, and I have also got some water as well, because I would like to try watering down just to see what it's going to do, because we like to find these things out. So I'm going to grab my super fancy schmancy paper. Now, I'm not sure whether I need to tape this down like you would with watercolour paper. I've also got this, it's a Windsor & Newton foundation brush, and it's kind of touted as a multi-purpose brush, but it is flat tipped. So I think this is actually called a filbert brush. It's one of the ones with the kind of rounded tops on it, and it's quite firm, so I thought that might be quite good for testing things out. So I'm just going to batter in, as we would say, and let's get some swatching done. And I'm just going to squish out a tiny little bit of each of these. So I mean, you can see the difference in the colours there. That's the cadmium yellow hue and the lemon yellow one is a much cooler colour than the other one. It seems to come out the tubes really easily. It's not ridiculously thick. I think they call the really thick ones, it's either firm bodied or full bodied, or is that wine? Anyway, it's thicker and it's meant for really textured work, you know, like more consistent with maybe like oil painting. But I think these are supposed to be like a middle of the road type job. I love seeing all the colours together like this, they're so pretty. We've got the phthalo green here. I can see how you would go through a lot of this paint very, very quickly. It would be quite easy to get carried away, I think. And this is the raw umber. So we've got a really nice colour selection here. And I'm going to try and blob out a tiny bit of white. This probably won't go so well. Oh, come on. Yes, there we go. So we've got a little bit of everything. So I just want to start off by almost swatching them dry. So I'm just going to dampen my brush a tiny little bit and kind of like dab it off on here, just so that it's, yeah, it's malleable. So it is a really thick consistency, and the consistency kind of reminds me of gouache straight out of a tube. That rose carmine's lovely. You can't really see the white on this canvas type paper because it is, you know, quite a sort of brilliant white, but it might be useful because I'm imagining we can layer this paint up. It is quite quick drying as well, so we're not going to have to wait ages if we do want to try and layer them together. Now obviously the potential downfall of that is if you're wanting to mix colours on the paper, then you're going to have to be quick. You do get, it's one of the things that's actually mentioned in this great big leaflet here, is that you can buy a medium that you can mix in with it, and it's basically a retardant and it slows down the drying process. And the idea behind that is it's giving you more time to work with the paint before it hardens, because that's one thing with acrylic. Once it's dry, it's not like watercolour. You can't sort of reactivate it. Once it's dry, you're pretty much done. So there are ways and means. It's basically like, this is like a base product, and you can, you know, stick lots of additives in it to make it do certain things and give it other properties. But say, seeing as I'm not really versed in this, and also it's really difficult to get hold of things right now, you know, I think I'm okay with just having the paint to begin with. Okay, I'm quite enjoying the sort of oil paint consistency, you know, that slightly sort of textured squishiness where you can leave your brush strokes in it. That's quite interesting. I've never been that kind of person, well, not that I know of anyway, but it makes things quite exciting. So you can see you've got some really bold colours. They are quite opaque as well, which is quite nice. So I'm just now going to mix a little bit of water. So I'm just going to like really wet my brush here and take a little corner, and I'm just going to mix it until the consistency thins down, you know, so there's no sort of lumps and bumps in it. It does behave in a sort of wishy-washy fashion. Now I'm interested to see what happens if I add water to it on the canvas as well. Yeah, I mean, that's moving about really freely. Again, as long as you're quick, I think you would be okay. But also you could then take paint in its sort of raw form, undiluted, and you could add that in just in certain corners or certain areas, and then just blend it out around the edges, so you could get a really nice mix of the neat paint with the texture that comes with it out to something really, really subtle. Because one of the advantages of having a thicker paint like this is there's lots of options for textures, you know, sort of stippling and, you know, using like a flat brush to leave those nice paint strokes, kind of like we've got going on up here with the ultramarine. So that's quite interesting. So I'm going to let that dry. Okay, so my camera cut out there for a little minute. I'm sorry about that, guys. All I did there was mix up some purple with a pink and a little bit of blue. And when I mixed them on the actual plate, I didn't fully mix them and I just dragged the brush through it, and it's left me with a really nice sort of slightly marbled effect in the paint when I've put it onto the canvas. If I just tilt it in the light there, you should be able to see some of the pink here, and then I've mixed it entirely here to give us this lovely attractive shade of purple. And then all I've done literally just there is I've watered it down and I've popped it on here. And it's quite interesting that as this is drying, you can't really see the brush strokes, you know, using this flat brush, so you can conceal the brush strokes if that's what you want to do. But see, once it's dry, you can go back over it, so you could really build that up. Although it's a wash, you can build it up to be a little bit more intense and have that sort of watercolour feel with it, knowing that once it's completely dry, it's not going to budge and you can start working over the top of it as well. So that's quite interesting too. So my next pondering is, how accurate can we be with a small brush using the paint in its neat form? In my experience, using really thick paint, it can be very difficult to control it just because it's quite globby. So I'm going to take this phthalo green here and just see what happens. And I have a funny feeling that it's going to be the same as the gouache. Obviously, a little bit of this is down to how good your brush control is. And mine, it's a lot better than it used to be. It's not perfect by any means, but you can get fairly detailed lines, I think. This is a number 4, so we're only going to be able to go so thin. But it seems to be relatively easy to control. However, if we add a tiny bit of water, so if I just pull some of this out and try not to drop the brush. For those of you who are new here, because there are quite a few of you, that was a typical hand spasm. I had an operation on my hand many years ago and it left me with some nerve damage, and I randomly just drop things or throw things about. Sometimes it's not intentional, but it does make for some interesting artwork. Okay, so just by adding a tiny little bit of water there, I've just made the paint, I like to say I've made it more mobile, and I think you'll find now that it's much easier to control the line width. And although it is making the paint slightly more transparent, it's not enough to be classed as very watery. So that's really good to know as well. And again, I do that with gouache a lot of the time as well. I very rarely use it straight out the tube. But that's just making for much more controllable brush strokes. Even me with my dodgy hand, that's made it a lot easier. So for the rest of you people that have normal hands, that will be not a problem for you. That will be pretty good. I quite like to have another go with this sort of marbly type effort, just because you guys missed it, but also because it was really fun. So I'm going to go back to this little filbert brush here, and it's just damp, nothing else. But I'm going to take some of this green, I'll whack it over here. And then I'm going to lift some of the yellow because that'll stand out quite nicely. And obviously those two colours are pretty good together. So I'm just going to stick that in there and not mix it too much, because see, we want this sort of strange. So it's almost like you don't want to upset the paint too much because it does start to mix. So I've got some nice little yellow curves here, just mixed in with the green, and that's pretty awesome. Let's just load it onto the brush and see what, oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So yeah, I think that acrylic paint could be incredibly good fun. I could just sit here all day and do this. Goodness me. Okay, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. The other thing that people talk about a lot as well that they use with acrylic paint, and I tend to do it with gouache, I don't do it with acrylic paint, but it's to use the splatter technique. And it kind of goes against my orderly sense because I don't like a lot of mess, but in the interests of experimentation. So again, I'm just going to clean my brush off, and what you want is you want some reasonably watered down paint because it has to be able to splatter, you know, that's just you know, it has to be mobile enough to do that. So I'm just going to plonk this straight into the ultramarine. and give it a really good mix about here. And I'm going to try and load as much as I can onto the brush. Now there's a couple of ways that you can do this, and you can do this with any type of paint or ink for that matter. So once you've got plenty on the brush, you can flick it really quickly and it will give you some splodges and some splatters. Helps if some of it would land on the actual white bit of the canvas, but never mind. Let's try again. And I have found it tends to take like a minute or two for it to get going if you're going to do it this way. But you know, you can get some quite interesting splash marks and splodges. Or the other thing that you can do is you can dip your brush in and then using your finger, some people do it with a toothbrush, but you want to flick the bristles, so you want to pull the bristles up towards you but point the brush towards your surface so that you get this sort of splatter technique. And this is really good for galaxies or like star backgrounds, or even just for adding a little bit of interest to something that's quite plain. And you can make it as subtle or as hefty as you like. You know, you can really load the brush up and you can go back over it repeatedly and it'll give you this sort of splatter pattern. So that's, again, like this, like acrylic seems to be really fun, and the fact that it's quite versatile and you can do quite a lot of it. But see, the main thing for me is this fact that once it's dried, you can go over the top of it with other things and it's not going to shift about. And that's a real sort of novelty, because with watercolour, which is what I tend to paint in, that's not really an option for you unless you fix a layer and then go in on top of it. So I was just going to see how dry this is, because I think we've got the textured blobs that came off the edge of the brush, they're still wet. If I just tap this, yeah, you can see there that that's still to dry, but this part here is dry. So I want to try and layer up some colour now. So let's see what happens when we try and put white over the top of this. Now I'm pressing quite hard onto the canvas there, and it's, if you look at the paintbrush, it's not picked up any of the blue whatsoever, nothing. And if we do it with a watered down version, let's see what happens if we do that. So just do what I did before and try and mix out some of the lumps. And then quite a firm pressure. It's picked up a little bit of the paint, but not a huge amount, and I can actually still see the texture of the paper through because I've pressed quite hard. Just here I can still see a little bit of a crisscross on the paper, similar to what's going on up in this top part. So you can put lighter colours on top of darker colours, that's not going to matter because it is quite opaque. So let's try, I've got the round brush here, so I'm going to try some of this cadmium yellow. And I want to see how much it's going to stand out on top of this darker blue, on top of the ultramarine. Let's try and block some of it off. Oops, maybe that was a bit heavy-handed. Okay, so when I'm doing that, I can still see the blue through the paint. But I'm thinking you would probably be able to build that up without too much hassle. So I've got the yellow down here as well, that's pretty dry. I'm just trying to avoid my splatters, and maybe I should have done the splatters last. So we've got this yellow here, and let's say for example you wanted to build up a sunset or something, I don't know. There, that's going on top of there without any issues. And if we take some of the neat paint and really slap it on, then that's covering up the yellow. It's not, you know, none of the yellow is showing through, so you're not getting that sort of layered colour effect. So you can keep the true colour of the paint that you actually want just by having it that little bit thicker. So the last thing I want to try out is to see what it's like trying to fill in the gaps. So you can see here I've got my two strokes of this green, and say for example I wanted to make like a, I don't know, like a turquoise colour, and I'll make it quite a light colour I think. So I'm going to take some of this cerulean blue, which is a nice colour in itself, it's very pretty, and maybe just a squidge of the phthalo green. Mix those together a little bit. That's quite a nice colour. And then I'll take a scoop of white and we'll lighten it up a little bit. And let's see what we can get here. Oh, that's nice. That is a really pretty colour. Now these Windsor & Newton acrylics, these come in 60 colours, so even if your paint mixing isn't that hot or there's a colour that you tend to gravitate towards, green, then you can buy them in the pre-mixed tubes. So it's really easy for me, especially with this quite firm filbert brush, to paint up to the line of green that I've already got down without fear of mixing them up or, you know, the mixing together. And that's actually really easy and really nice. And look, I've got a really nice bold flat colour there. You can't see any of my paintbrush strokes because the paint is thick enough to cover it but thin enough to lie flat. And then we could just pull that out the sides if you wanted a wee bit of texture. So if you want to do some like block painting, or you just want to block in the main parts of an image before you go in and do your detail work, it's going to be perfect for that as well. There is literally no overlap there whatsoever. And again, that was just by using a little bit of pressure on the brush and making sure that the consistency of the paint wasn't too thick and wasn't too watery. So yeah, I'm quite excited about this, guys. Oh wow, there we go. So I've just basically made a mess, but doesn't that look absolutely beautiful? So we have lots of properties to think about. And I just want to talk a little bit about the different types of things that you can add in, and that is just purely going off what I am learning from this big leaflet. So the first thing that they talk about is the heavy structure gel, and what it says is it basically thickens the consistency of the paint. Now to me that paint is really thick already, but obviously I am not an acrylic person or an oil person, so you know, that seems really thick to me. But it says basically you can add body and accentuate your brush marks, so just make them really, really obvious if that's your painting style or you want to play about with it. So that's heavy structure gel. It talks about texture as well. And it says to change the surface texture for illusions of depth and structure, gels and pastes can be mixed with your paint. So there's one here that's glass beads, there's black lava and sand texture gels, and there's a tiny little picture here, and I'm probably not going to be able to give you a good shot of it. So can you see this sort of sandy texture that it's bringing up? And that is by adding something directly to the paint, so that could be quite interesting as well. Especially if you're doing like buildings and things, I think that would be really good. I was talking earlier about the drying times. They do a fluid retarder, and that increases drying time to help assist blending. So that's what I was talking about actually mixing the paint on the paper or on the canvas. Wet on wet technique. Dilute paint to create pooling and dispersion effects. So that's very similar to watercolour, and they have a flow improver that they say that you can add to the water to further this technique. Personally, if any of you have had any experience of flow improver, I would love to hear about it, but that to me seems quite gimmicky. Just fire in loads of water, you can have great fun with that. Matte and gloss mediums, so you can reduce the sheen of the paint to a matte finish, or you can increase it to a gloss finish. So if you want something really shiny, you could add the gloss medium to the paint and it would go like golden syrupy kind of shiny, which is again very interesting. And the last thing that they talk about here is pearlescent and glittery effects. So they have an iridescent medium that you can mix in, and that's pretty cool, and it's something that's quite popular as well, as having glittery things in your pictures, just to add a bit of interest, or you know, just make it that little bit more glitzy. So that would be quite interesting as well, because you can add that to any colour. You can basically make a pearlescent version of any colour that you can mix. So the sky's the limit with that one. I think at a later stage I might try and get a hold of a few of these. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them, but I'll certainly try and see what we can come up with, because that might be quite interesting to explore as well. The last thing they talk about are varnishes, and there's a gloss varnish here. And they also have varnish remover, and that's just like a finishing coat to protect your painting. So I hope that that's been educational. That's certainly been educational for me, because I didn't know you could add so much stuff to acrylic paint. But truthfully, just even this first little exploration and experiment here, I'm really impressed with the versatility of it as a paint. And I think because it's quite thick and there's loads of bright colours and it's quite bold, it feels like a really easy paint to to start with, you know, like for someone that's never painted before, it seems to be very forgiving. The fact that you can cover things up really easily, you can water things down, you can mix them, you can half mix them. It's yeah, I'm really quite impressed with this, and I'm quite excited. The paint on my palette is starting to dry a little bit now. So the last thing, I just want to quickly try and blend these on the canvas and see what happens while they're still wet, because I'd like to see if I can get like a nice sort of orangey colour. I've definitely got more red than orange going on here. I've probably got far too much paint on my brush, but that's okay. Even that type of effect there, you know, that sort of slightly stippled effect is really interesting in itself. And again, something that I don't experience with watercolour. You'd be really hard pushed to do that with watercolour. But you know, half of me actually just like, half of me would want to blend that out and make it a lovely smooth gradient. And the other half of me is like, that's really interesting, let's just leave it as it is. And that makes me feel very painterly and arty-farty. So much to explore, so much to do, and in the next video we are going to try and paint something which will be rather exciting. So I hope you're looking forward to that as much as I am. I have had excellent fun today, I truly have, and I'm just really happy that all these colours are sitting on this palette together, because I just love that. That just makes me a happy person. So I want to thank you very much for watching. I hope that you have learned something. Please keep safe and be sensible, and we'll see you back in the cave on Sunday for another video. Have a good day everyone, and bye for now.